And what I want to talk about in this very brief sermon today is the spiritual solutions to some of the contemporary problems on the planet. That's my theme. And I want to talk about the fighting and the war going on in Syria particularly, which really upsets me. It's been going on for a few years now. And Syria is a very special country. Damascus, which we heard about earlier in our reading from the Kabbalah, was the seat of great Jewish communities which took in refugees from Spain when the Jews were persecuted and thrown out of Spain by the conquering Catholic monarchy. They took refuge in Damascus under the Ottoman regime, which was very tolerant and allowed Christians, Jews, Muslims to live in harmony. And I think it's very sad. I think we should be mindful that the world needs to remember what the secret of tolerance is, the secret of interfaith harmony. What I've tried to do in the book that we've celebrated the publication of this weekend is in the Kabbalah runes, is show esoterically how that is possible. Even between the two most, one would have thought, antithetically opposed esoteric traditions on the planet, namely the Jewish Kabbalah and the Norse runes, which in World War II, in a sense, were mortal enemies. And yet, by showing that actually they come from a common source, I think there is no violently opposed forces on the planet that esoteric philosophy can't point to a common root. As we've seen in that reading from the Gospel of Truth, everything traces back to a common idea, a common spiritual source. Every language, every word goes back to a common root. Syria was the place where St. Paul had his vision on the road to Damascus, when he saw in a blinding light that the persecution of the other is a tragic mistake. And from being a violent man who'd persecuted others and seen them killed, he helped with the murder of Stephen, the first martyr of Christianity. He changed and became a man devoted to tolerance and peace through esoteric understanding. And we have his stained glass window overlooking this chapel where we're meeting. So to me, that wisdom tradition that Syria stood for is what is at stake in this war. It's a struggle for mankind. Can our esoteric wisdom collectively transcend and overcome our ignorance and our shadow and our projections? The other great sage that's buried in Damascus is Ibn Arabi, who was known as the greatest saint or sage of Islam, the Sheikh of Sheikhs, who wrote enormous numbers of commentaries and books, and he wrote studying wisdom as it was revealed in all different prophets. And he was from Cordoba in Spain. And in the 90s I went to a conference organised by UNESCO and gave a paper on how Ibn Arabi and the Zohar, the Kabbalistic tradition, and Raymond Lull, the Franciscan mystic, all went back to a common source. And we've seen again in that reading from the Gospel of Truth that this is actually factual. They do go back to a common source. It's not a hypothesis to be discussed by scholars in a polite way. It's an actual factual reality that can be claimed by people, men and women on the street. And religious leaders at all spheres of responsibility should be saying this message, I believe, whether it's in the mosque, in the synagogue or the churches, or in the Druid groves or the pagan covens. It's all the same fundamental teaching to do with divine unity. And this is the orthodoxy within all the heresies. This is where all the heresies come together. They're united in all of them stressing this divine unity, which is also the healing of reconciliation, of the long war between men and women, male and female aspects of our natures. So Christ is a symbol, if you want, of that courage to stand up for that unity and that love, which is our experience of that unity. When that unity comes between two souls, we experience it as love. When it comes for societies, we experience it as agape, collective, enlovement, which is a word I coined, like enlightenment, the mind does enlightenment, the heart does enlovement, which is a state like enlightenment that we can attain, enlovement. So those are just a few thoughts. I think that's the challenge for Syria. It's also the challenge for Israel-Palestine and for the Temple Mount, which in this last week has again seen difficulties. The chief imam of Jerusalem was arrested and questioned by the Israeli police and military. This shouldn't, be happening. My vision was the reopening of the Golden Gate in the east wall of Jerusalem and the interfaith sharing of a platform for peace on the Temple Mount. I think that is an ontological necessity for mankind, that we re-emphasize our unity. And then the visions and dreams of the great Kabbalists of the past, like the man we heard about earlier from Safat, and those who are alive now and practicing, and the Christian lineage, Christ being a great Kabbalist teacher in his own right, would then become fulfilled. So at that point, our weapons, such as the nuclear weapons in the loch here opposite the castle, are no longer needed because we found the secret of love. And that, I think, is our moral duty as Druids, seers, mystics, men and women, to reclaim that right to enlightenment, that right to enlightenment, which is the thought I wanted to share with you today.